Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. No other segment of the T&L space has been more disrupted in the last 12 months than freight tech. Here to make a little sense of it for us is a good friend, Jason Mazur from Transflo. Jason, welcome to Hot Seat.
Thanks, Spencer. As always, it's great to see you.
So before we heat things up a little bit, why don't you just take 20 seconds and help us understand what you're doing with Transflo, and we'll just kind of kick things off that way.
Yeah, no. So appreciate the time first off, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to actually land at Transflo a few months ago under the leadership of Renee Krug and Bill Vitti, who I absolutely adore and respect, and the things that they've done in their career. But I'm specifically on the commercial side, strategic account executive, or is what I'll tell people, I'm a strategic problem solver. But what we're really focused on is back office automation, right? When we think about, and this goes for carriers, brokers, and even factors, all the invoices that are coming in, the paperwork, the trail that goes with it, auditing, how can we make that process faster, less error prone, and make the lives of the people that are looking at these much better, honestly, and take the mundane out of it.
All right. You ready to heat things up a little bit?
Let's go. Let's dive in.
Let's dive in. All right. So offline, right before we got on here, you told me, hey, man, I'm a no BS guy.
Yeah.
So to provide a little context for our conversation here, where are you seeing BS in the marketplace as it relates to all things freight tech?
Oh, man. Oh, that's a big question. It's a loaded one. I love it. There's when I think of BS, right? And it's no disrespect to anyone that's out there. It's what are the buzzwords that people are using? Is there any meat behind it? Any like real value behind it, right? And what I meant by when I said no BS, that's one of the reasons I love where I'm at today, is that I believe in what we're doing. This company has essentially kind of reinvented itself to some degree in the last 18 months, and which is why I'm super excited. And I've been doing my best to knock down doors and talk to everyone and just kind of spreading the Transflo cheer, right? If we're thinking about Christmas time and all the good things that we're doing. But it's really just, it's about driving outcomes. And unfortunately, the market is where it's at right now. And at the end of the day, it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast before earlier this morning, and actually even just some of the takeaways from F3, right? Is those that are taking the time right now who taken more of a conservative approach on how they've managed their business, but those that are kind of doubling down on freight tech to drive further efficiencies are going to weather this storm and come out even greater on top when things do return. So I'm not quite sure if that answered. I didn't want to throw anyone
No,
under the bus.
no, I get it. I mean, you got to get out way upstream in terms of getting to the source of some of these problems. And to that end, let's talk about your company. You mentioned this kind of, as people don't know, it's kind of a quiet, 30-year history with Transflo, and some people don't realize that. I have a staggering statistic here that on an annual basis, 115 billion in freight bills processed through Transflo. That blew my mind, right? Like,
Yeah.
that is an unbelievable amount of money movement that's
Yes,
taking
it
place
is.
through there.
It's
And then we've got the merger with ATI back in May, and so high level, kind of like, how would you describe Transflo? Because you kind of mentioned it's almost like a new company in some respects, but like, tell us about where you're at presently after all these developments.
Whew. Well, like I mentioned earlier, right? We're under new leadership. Even just from looking at where we're applying innovation is impressive. I always tell people we're kind of like the godfather in document imaging, right? You think about a 30-year-old company that has somehow survived this long in this industry. It's impressive. But we're also doing impressive things, whether it was some of our legacy offerings or where we're going now with what we're calling kind of our next gen solutions, which is workflow AI. And I'll dive into that a bit later. And some of our other solutions like digital fuel cards, digital wallet, as we're calling it. But Transflo itself, as I mentioned, is predominantly been a document imaging company. and their solutions have really evolved over time. That how can we make the lives of drivers easier, operations go smoother? And it goes from, if you stop at any truck stop, you might even see one of our truck stop kiosks for scanning and sending in those paperwork. We still have customers that leverage our TripTrack Express, where you put the paper documents in an envelope, and it'll overnight, we'll scan it, doc type it, index it, and you make the data available to you. Now we have super apps that customers leverage that can tie into their TMS to make the driver's life easier. Navigation, where to stop, where pickup and drop off is, scanning of documents even through that mobile app, right? And now it's just evolving more and more, and all these various ingestion points of where data is coming into. How can we make it easier at the end of the day for customers to bill, or I guess our customers to bill their customers faster and pay the carriers or drivers faster, right? Because at the end of the day, it's relationships, and it becomes a differentiator. And then on the other side of it, right, the ATA merger that you talked about, I think when they looked at it, right, in even present day, is ATI established one hell of a brand in the industry, and what Frank and his team were able to do over the years there. And it just made sense that, when you bring in telematics, analytics, and really fleet management solutions into the Transflo ecosystem and merge those together, now we're able to go to large carriers or brokerage or just logistics providers, right, that have both. And it's amazing that we're able to go and kind of offer them a total solution that's going to help drive their business forward.
No, I love it. I love the boldness of the move. And I like it because I think there's a lot of folks, no matter where you are in the T&L space, that no matter how you have done business over the last 30 years, if you're going to be in this space, there's always the constant need to innovate and reinvent. And I think what you guys are doing is it's very exciting, and I hope it gives inspiration to a lot of folks, even on the freight and the brokerage side. They can do the same things. I think this is it's just a great model to see that no matter how old or how established you are, there's always more opportunity on the other side of reinvention, and innovation. So kudos to you guys. So let me dip in here right now, kind of set the stage. I think we can probably both agree the last 12 months, just for a lot of folks in this space, just brutal environment, most especially just from a pure cash flow standpoint.
Yes.
And so maybe you can help us frame that. Like, why are so many businesses, freight and brokerages, where's the tension coming from? Can you help us frame what's happening?
Yeah, obviously, when we look at the market as a whole and the excess capacity and rates being down, right? I'm fortunate, well, I guess depending on how you look at cold calls, but I have the opportunity to speak with a number of folks on a daily basis. It's part of my job, and actually I love it. And if I didn't love it, I wouldn't be successful, right? But to my point, when I talk to people on the phone, right, they're having to book 70% more loads to get 70% of the same revenue they did last year, right? We all know rates are down, capacity's up, and of course, there's been some big closures, unfortunately, and there's a lot more to come. During COVID, you saw a ton of brokerages get established, and those will probably not really weather the storm, and some will come out on top, right? Rightfully so. But to the point, it's how do you weather that storm? How do you find efficiencies? How do you continue to position yourself for something that, if it does return, you're able to scale, but without having to, one, throw a ton of money at it, right? And so that's kind of where I'm fortunate enough to be able to help my customers and kind of shed some insight on that, right? Is, hey, you can either go this route that you're going, or we can help you reduce your cost to serve and help you protect those already thin margins, and leverage your resources in a more efficient, not just efficient manner, but repurpose them, right? If I could take people that are, let's say there's 50 seats in the back office that are looking at invoices all day, comparing them, there's error rates. They're having to call carriers, hey, we missed a document, having to call customers, hey, we submitted this invoice, right? Take the headache out of it, and now repurpose maybe 40 of them, maybe more, because automation has taken over. And now what would those say 40 seats or those 40 headcounts do for your business if they were customer facing making calls, right? It could be tremendous for any
Yeah.
organization, right? Um, so sorry, I was kind of going down a path
No, I
there
know. I
and
know.
went off on a
I
tangent.
feel the passion. So,
Yeah,
so walk me through this. You mentioned cold calls, and
yeah,
that's music to my ears. Just because like, listen, I have respect for people that are going out there and just doing the work, right? And so,
mhm,
but I'm curious, what what are you hearing that's resonating with folks? Because as a business owner, you're just like, cash flow. I don't care how
yeah,
I fix it. Doesn't matter. And there's a we were at the McLeod conference together. There's
yep,
so many different innovations that could potentially be a solution. As a professional problem solver, you've been in freight tech for a long time. I mean, like what's the process? How do you like if you're in that moment? Number one, like what's the language that you're using that's engaging people, that you're able to get them thinking about their problem and beginning to solve it. And then I guess the other part about that is, like, as a professional problem solver, what is your process? How do you help somebody through
yeah. No, those are great questions, right? And really, it depends on what time of day you're getting someone sometimes. And
that?
lately, I've actually had people return voicemails, which is awesome. And I always give them kudos. I'm like, hey, much love for returning my voicemail because there's only maybe about 1 or 2% that do it as a professional courtesy. And I absolutely love it when I get it. And some might say, hey, you're crazy for leaving a 90-second voicemail 20 times a day, right? But there's that chance that someone does return a call and you have a fruitful conversation, which I enjoy. But to your earlier question, right? When I am speaking to someone, what's resonating with them, right?
Mhm.
And it really depends, right? Is it the CFO? Is it a VP of finance? Is it someone on the brokerage, head of brokerage, or operational side? At the end of the day, it's just like, hey, these are the outcomes we're solving for, right? Or these are the outcomes we're helping our customers achieve, right? Today we hear that semi-automation, manual processes, right? They have complex customers that want certain kind of white glove hand holding or processes or audits or rules in place. Hey, I need a stamp on the POD. We're looking for multiple signatures, right? These are things that then take time out of your operational resources to dive into and or do follow-ups with a carrier, right? And so, what are the consequences of not solving potentially those challenges or those hurdles that you have today, right? It just means more operational inefficiency at the end of the day, and it's going to cost you more, right? And when we think about cost, rates are down. So I want to help my customers, Transflo's customers, keep those margins as high as possible and not
Mhm.
have those inefficiencies. And then, of course, there's lost revenue opportunities when you think about freight invoicing, right? From carriers. Oh, I forgot this lumper fee, or I forgot this accessorial charge. Well, now do you really have to go back to your customer and rebuild them and potentially, excuse my language, piss them off, right? And there's gate checks on that, right? And why not leverage what technology has really evolved to, right? We're starting to see, of course, and I don't want to drop buzzwords because I said I'm a no BS guy and I'm not a marketing person, is we've got things like AI and machine learning that are now catching up into the freight tech space that are really starting to help. And some of these that are more kind of freight led brokerages have adopted early on AI technology. So
I'm
it's to
curious.
your point and what you were asking, right? The conversations that I'm having that are piquing interest is like, hey, these are the positive outcomes that I'm helping my customers achieve. Do you care about these? Right? At the end of the day, if I had to simplify it and break it down, I'll have conversations that last 90 seconds. Hey, this sounds great. We're already doing it. And I start peeling back the onion and they're not. And that's fine. Right.
Mhm.
And then there's some that are like, this is interesting. And I'll have a 20, 30-minute cold call conversation, which is usually best case scenario, but they really do care about it. And then where do we go from here? Hey, let's have a follow-up conversation. Let me dive further into those, right? How's this impacting the business? How does this impact your people? Who else cares about this, right? Typical questions that you would normally ask in any typical sales conversation if you're good at what you do, right? But I
I
enjoy
think
that because I love
if
peeling
you're
back the
good, I
layers.
think that was the qualifying statement there. If you're good at what you do, And I bring that up for a couple of reasons, Jason, because I want the carriers and I want the brokerages to hear that,
Yeah.
but I also want salespeople to hear that because this has been a market that's humbled a lot of salespeople. Um,
Yeah.
and and so in terms of kind of getting back to the basic things, I hope what some of our audience heard were that was some really good language, if nothing else, just in terms of incorporate into your sales skills because um, if you want to aspire to be the best, you need to listen to the best, what they're doing, and obviously you've been doing what you've been doing for a long time.
I was gonna say God gave you two ears and one mouth. Which one should you use more of, right?
That's right. That's right. So let's I back up big picture. We mentioned the market right now. What are some things that you're excited about? There's certainly some things that are challenges, but what are some things happening within freight tech, specifically broad category that you are excited about? What it means for our industry.
Whew. Well, obviously I'm biased, right? Of course, I'm super excited about what we're doing here at Transflo and what we're doing for our customers, right? If anyone, has seen our LinkedIn post, right? We've had a great customer on stage with us, and they talked about an increase in productivity by 800%, right? That's tremendous, right? And automation is only going to improve because 800% increase in productivity, right? I mean, it's kind of hard to tear away from that one. But there's so much innovation going on, right? I didn't have the opportunity to be at F3, unfortunately. I was on vacation with my lovely wife, Carly, who you know. Um, but I did see a lot of good keynote speakers, Brad Jacobs for one, who I was listening to. And oh man, I think there's so much going on. It's just a matter of, right, again, outcomes, right? I think there's a lot of tech that's out there that is like, hey, this is really cool. We're doing some cool things, but does it help you move the needle?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I know it's kind of general. I don't know if there's anything specific that, is really drawing my attention per se, but I'm also not out there looking at, everyone that's up and coming. I do keep my ears kind of close to the ground. I am following a number of companies and seeing what the big guys are doing. And I've been fortunate enough, as I mentioned, to have some great conversation with leaders across top 100 brokerages, right? Even some of the top five. And essentially, they're all trying to solve the same problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can I be more efficient? How can I do more with the same amount of resources I have? Or, unfortunately, sometimes you need to move or what I call redirect people, right? Let's take them out of the mundane stuff. Let's put them over here where they're going to add real value. What's going to accelerate the business when things do recover? So, not sure I answered the question there,
No,
but
I no,
I'm excited for the opportunity when things return because I think those that are investing and putting the time into technology are going to come out on top, and they're gonna see the fruits of their labor. It's going to be awesome.
no, I agree. What's the blessing of periods like this is that it provides a very rare mirror in front of your face and letting you know as a business who you are and who you are not.
Yeah,
And I think that for those that are being proactive and demonstrating humility as part of getting better, limitless possibilities on the other side of this particular cycle. But to that end, when we start talking about, you mentioned this 800% increase in efficiency. Could you help us specifically on the freight invoicing and auditing kind of features of your tech? Can you break it
yeah.
down from the unit economics, like per invoice or whatever else? Like, help us understand what that means so that there's some context.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right. So if you look at, say, an audit or sorry, a billing analyst per se, right? You think about how many you need to cover whatever you're using today. I talk to folks that have incumbent solutions. They have something that's homegrown, or in some cases, it's very manual, right? Docs get emailed. I got to open up a bunch of emails that go into a shared inbox, right? Maybe you got 10 people working in that department. Maybe you have three, but they're sharing an inbox and they're not sure who's working on what has a set of eyes on it, what doesn't. And then if there's discrepancies, how am I documenting those discrepancies? Or do I literally put a sticky note on an invoice or a POD or a rate con, and now I got to give it to someone in the sales group or operations side to say, hey, go look into this. right? There's so many complexities that go into it and headaches, to be honest with you. And especially when you're working in an environment that really doesn't have automation in place, or maybe let's call it intelligent processing. So where we really come in is we're kind of that floodgate before your TMS, right? We essentially ingest all the documents. We can identify what is legitimate, what is not legitimate. So when we talk about end to end, it's really how do we OCR the hell out of that document, right? Using the great technology that's out there, right? I mentioned machine learning. Auto classify that document and then extract the data from that, right? Because today, most people have to look at it. They open up the email and they have multiple screens open, or they print it out and they're looking at it and they're confirming. That stuff doesn't have to happen anymore, right? You have the ability to leverage tech. And so now, oh, this is a Raycon, or this is a duplicate, or this isn't even a legitimate invoice. It's from a carrier we never even done business with. Why should your people have to look at that? So I'm going back to the ingestion of documents, the auto classification, the extraction, and now verification and validation of that data, right, against your TMS, because there's APIs and that connectivity is there, that now we can run these documents against configuration, business rules, right? Oh, this is for this customer. This goes to this crew. But it's not about just moving the invoice from this queue to a person. It's moving an organization that traditionally looked at every single piece of paper to now managing by exception. I don't need to see what's working well, right? Let's go ahead and auto approve those. Have my folks use the knowledge that they've gained over the years they've been with the company, and now they become knowledge workers, right? They're more valuable to the organization, or they feel even more empowered, to be honest with you, because they're not just looking down at clerical work and pulling my, I'd pull my hair out if I was having to do that every day in and out. But now they're managing by exception and they're empowered to help and go find, hey, why did this happen, right? And now there's analytics behind it where I can see, again, to your point, that 800% increase in productivity. Hey, Johnny over here was only getting through 30 invoices a day and now he's doing 200, right? What would that mean for the business, right? Or you're doing 10,000 invoices a week, or 10,000 loads a week, or 10,000 loads a month, right? There's customers that we've got that are the behemoths, and then we've got customers, $180 million brokerages that are just continuing to grow and being able to process a hell of a lot more because of this tech. But to your point, putting some economics behind it.
Yeah.
I think a number of our customers have been able to say, hey, look, we know that we're paying Johnny X amount per hour. And we know that based on his approval, the processing time is whatever minutes or seconds that, some say it is. And our system can process documentation within seconds. And there's an audit trail of what approved, what were the discrepancies, right? Draw my attention to the things that need my attention, not to the things that don't, right? So kind of that in a nutshell.
Yeah, I want to expand on this management by exception concept, which that's a great phrase. I'm curious, of the people that you personally assess. Let's just call management by exception kind of the best in class standard. Like that's future
Yeah.
state. That's well, it's not future state. Let's just say that's best in class.
Yeah.
Of the companies that you engage with, have a conversation, they're interested in trying to get better. What percent of folks are currently functioning at that level presently?
Oof. I think it's not as high as we would think or would hope for, which means one, we've got a lot of work to do on ourselves. I got a lot more calls to make, or maybe people will call me or reach out to me on LinkedIn after this video. And there's some that, look, I'll be perfectly honest, right? I've had conversations where there's some that, hey, we have a solution in place and it's working, right? But now you need to ask the tougher questions. Well, what do you love about it? What would you change about it? What are the things that aren't working? And sometimes, people are reluctant to want to open up, and that's fine, right? I'll go back and revisit and we'll have a conversation later, but it's got to be, I mean, it'd be hard to put a number on it, but it's got to be less than a third, to be honest with you. Yeah, there's other players like us in the space, but there's no one like Transflo, I can tell you that much. And there's no one that has our leadership and the knowledge, right? I love the folks that we have, right? Having a product is one thing, having the people behind it is an entirely different thing. And we've got folks that have ran APAR at some of the biggest brokerages in the industry, and I love it, right? It's kind of that statement of this was built for us, by us type thing, right? But in this case, for the freight industry, really.
Hmm. No, I like that. What do you find when you ask pointed questions like that to C-level folks? What's the response when you say, well, like, what do you love about your current provider? I mean, that's a
Yeah.
challenging question. I mean, what do you receive back from those
Yeah.
types of
Sometimes I'll
strategic
hear, look,
questions?
we've been a customer of theirs for, 5, 7 years, or sorry, we just re-signed. Um, or they're just like, look, I have loyalty to them, which is great, but is that necessarily the best thing for your business, right? I think to be a good steward of this industry, right, we should always be learning. The same thing goes into sales, right? I listen to a weekly podcast. I read at least one book a month, uh, to do my best so that I can perform at my best and make sure that
Hmm.
the companies I work for get the best out of me, right? And I think if anyone listens, when the folks listen to this and they see me calling, hopefully they're like, hey, look, yeah, maybe I should open up. I shouldn't have to have be all
Yeah.
close tight and be open minded about what the possibilities are and where we can take you as a business. But yeah, I mean, I'll hear things that, oh, we've already done this. I'm like, oh, you have, right? Well, we're already doing this. I'm like, okay, can you elaborate a bit more? Let's peel that back a bit. And oh, so you're telling me it is manual? Because before you said you had this.
Yeah.
No, I don't say it in that kind of tone, but in my head, I'm saying it that way. But I mean,
Yeah.
I at the end of the day, I just want to help people, right? I mean, so if you'll see my LinkedIn profile, I call myself Mr. Fix It, and it's not just because of my ability to want to help problem solve, but I love to get my hands dirty, even around the house. I like to build things, and I like to fix things. It's always been in my
Yeah.
nature. I spent the first 10
I've
years of
seen
my
I've seen
career
some of the
in
evidence of that through the years.
IT.
I've seen that. Well, I think one of the things that where our worlds intersect is just in the value creation. And I think one thing that I'm particularly sensitive about right now when you have a market like this is and it's a cyclical industry. These always happen, but
Yes.
the response is key because people have worked so hard to create a certain amount of business value. If they don't do something productive or new or innovative, then there's the threat of losing much of what they've worked hard to create.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm curious for folks that are in my world that want to exit at a future date um, and want to approach value creation in the meanwhile responsibly. What advice would you give to them um, as they kind of lean into that and think about what they should be doing?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And I wish I had the silver bullet for it. Um, but I think, it's interesting. I'm going to go back to my history. So I've been fortunate enough to work for a number of great companies, and even in the startup hyper growth space, right? And we've seen it with those that mishandled the funds, right, that they've received, and the collapse of some company, like large organizations. I think sometimes you just have to play a kind of that conservative. Let's pump the brakes. Let's make sure that we're in a position to scale the business and not too aggressively to where we expose ourselves to risk, which again some have, and I've been a part of organizations that have done that as well. Um, but the value creation, yeah, how can we help accelerate our people? How do we equip them to do more, right? Reflect in the mirror. I think you mentioned it earlier, right? Get a hard look in the mirror and like, what are we good at? What are we not good at? Is our messaging there, right? What's resonating with our customers? What's not resonating with them? I think sometimes we forget to stop and kind of visit that, where successful companies, they get caught up in it, or maybe there's a period of growth. And then when things are bad, it's like, oh, shoot, we really didn't stop to think about the things that weren't going well. And now we're exposed. And unfortunately, again, some aren't weathering the storm here. And to your point, right, it's a cyclical industry. It's ups and downs. Yes, we're in a bad period. I'm sure it's going to get a little bit worse around the holiday. Obviously, the predictions are it's going to return middle of the next year, but it's going to happen again. It's going to continue to happen. There's going to be ups and highs, or I'm sorry, highs and lows, as it has been historically. But you have to be able to position yourself, right? What are you going to do when stuff hits the fan? I'll put it nicely.
Yeah. Well, I got one more question for you, a little bit of a wild card. Now, one thing that we have in common, uh, we both married ultra dynamic entrepreneurial women. I think we can both agree to that.
Yep.
And then
We married up.
yeah, yeah, yes. Where we're not so much alike, you're clearly a much better handyman, and in that area. And I love that. That's kind of an additional source of creativity for you. So I'm curious, what is the home project
Oh,
that you're most proud of that you've done for your family?
some people think I'm crazy. I did two of them actually. And one of them took me three times as long because I had the first one. But you've probably seen them, pergolas in the backyard. I did two structures, one which has decking, one which is on the patio. And I did one of them entirely by myself. So one day I had guests over, and I'm going to tell you a quick story because it's funny. And there's a lot of pain afterwards. I got up on a ladder and I put a 16-foot by 12-inch by 2-inch cedar board on my back onto a ladder and lifted it up, hoping it wouldn't fall back on me, and then quickly went to the other ladders, drilled them in temporarily until I can get the bolts through. That one I absolutely I loved. I hated it at the same time, but I've done so many over the years. And the recent one was a complete rehab of already brand new built-ins and kind of redesigning it. I did a new mantle by hand in my garage, and turned out great. But when they're done, I'm happy that I don't have any more. I don't know if I'm going to have any projects for the foreseeable future, hopefully.
You've got plenty of projects to work on within our industry in the meanwhile, sir. Hey, I
Yes.
really appreciate you spending a little time with us and just sharing your insights of what's going on in the market, and
Yeah.
keep doing great things. That's going to do it for us in the hot seat, Jason. We will see you next time.
Thank you.